what your words are saying? We're all unique. We grew up with different experiences. We learn different things. We have different talents. We are all different. Sometimes I think we'll not be happy until everybody has the same beliefs and values as we do. Seems a shame. We struggle to get on and accept we're all so different. Currently, there's no possibility of learning everything about ourselves in our lifetime. What we can do is listen to ourselves and learn more about who we are through our own words. Remember, words can have 1,000 meanings depending on who's listening. Despite all the differences and uniqueness that exists, we live in the same world, and maybe it would be useful for some people to wake up to this. We also know that although we live in the same world, we are all experiencing it in different ways. We all have different values and beliefs that began forming during our childhood and grow and develop and can change as we age. Some of our beliefs are so entrenched, you may want to accept that they may never change. When we learn more about ourselves, it's usually our beliefs that we're looking into. In most cases, when we take in new information, we can change those beliefs that don't work for us. We may uncover some beliefs that can't be shifted because they're the foundation on which we live our lives. In these cases, we can sometimes redirect our behavior when we observe them coming into play. But we're human, and this can be extremely difficult in stressful situations. Stress is a huge problem today, and stress also means we fall back to old behavior patterns, orchestrated by our core beliefs, because that is how we always keep ourselves safe. Now you might be asking, what's this got to do with, are you always aware of what your words are really saying? Okay, all I've just done is given the topic a context. Now let's dive into some examples of what people say. My first coaching opportunity came when I had to present myself to 30 people and explain why I could add value. Everybody had to agree I didn't succeed. I was also asked to encourage everybody to get behind the new manager at the same time, and I had to do it all within 10 minutes. If you want agreement from a group, you must get confirmation from every single person in it. Otherwise, you don't know if they are really accepting. I always get every person to acknowledge one at a time. It's easy when you pay attention to tell if anybody isn't really convinced. I should say here that in places like the military, it's probably different because there's already an understanding in place. Plus, they know the consequences if they fail to follow the rules. During this first presentation of mine, I came across one guy who said, "Well, see how it goes." Everybody I asked before this guy had said unequivocally, yes. I explained to this guy what the words, "I'll see how it goes," were really saying. I'll see how it goes. He was saying, if the manager performs to his expectations, then he would support him. Yes, he had his expectations of how a manager should be. I told him this wasn't his prerogative. We seesaw backwards and forwards on the point I was trying to make, which he couldn't accept. I chose to persist at the risk of alienating the whole group. Eventually, he got what I was saying and he said yes, and clearly, without any reservation. Lesson: he possibly wasn't a team player and bad for the organization, but that wasn't for me to say. In this case, he turned direction and became a great team player not long afterwards. But it doesn't always happen, and sometimes they leave. With one of my clients a few years later, I know one person who I reported to the manager as a possible concern after I did a conversation audit left the company for a better paying job. So you never know. You never know what happens. It also must be understood that although 100% commitment is agreed at the time, this rarely lasts forever without ongoing team development. People get complacent and need ongoing stimulation. Excuse me. I learned that sometimes risk brings reward because 4 of the people asked for private coaching sessions immediately after the meeting. Plus, I was hired by the company to develop their people and all their teams. Next, I hear people say things like, focus on the good. Interesting, because it applies, they know what is good. There's no substance in that statement. When someone makes blanket statements like this, then in my experience, you should be very wary, because they are comparing you against what they believe is good, what they believe is right. Anything else in their view is generally seen as bad, and you've been labeled. Whenever you label a group of people, you're creating separation through judgment. There's no way, this is absolutely no way to further understanding and cooperation. Now this is fascinating because, for example, when you say someone is stubborn, you're usually being stubborn about them being stubborn. Yeah. In other words, you have a fixed point of view. This doesn't support anybody, especially you're stubborn, when your stubborn is competing with their stubborn. It's like saying, I'm right, you're wrong. Yeah, you've heard that. It might work better if you look at yourself and learn what the real issue could be for you. Next, toxic is another label for people who are seen as being different. And toxic covers a wide range of possibilities today. It's currently a popular word easily grasped by people to describe so many situations. Toxic means poisonous. And maybe it would be better to understand your relationship with the person and why you label them toxic or poisonous. In my experience, they are another human being with their issues, and you and they don't get on. Simple. From your point of view, you don't get on, and maybe from theirs too, regardless of what they do. There clearly isn't a fit, and sometimes it becomes violent, and that is never acceptable. Some situations seem almost impossible to extricate yourself from. It's easy to call people toxic because it justifies your view. Sorry, but it's a situation both people got into and somehow need to find a way out of for different reasons. There aren't always easy solutions, especially when both are connected in so many ways. Both people usually need some kind of support to help them resolve these situations. They can be extremely serious and dangerous, but The answer isn't to make them wrong by calling them toxic. Every one of us is a human being trying to survive and make sense, like every other human, and you're a human being too. My suggestion is try using another word rather than the toxic label, which is easy to call on or describe something you don't like. Okay, next. I react when people say, you're dead right, or you're absolutely right. First of all, I do not want to ever be dead right. Won't work for me. A response of you're absolutely right is saying, I agree with you, because that's in alignment with what I believe. The issue then is it's only what you two agree. And you could be the only two people who agree on that point. When you're fixed in this way, then you become less able to hear anything that disagrees with your view. People tend to get defensive if anything is said that opposes their view. If you want to be open, then find a way to use words that allow what you say to expand in the listener's mind. Rather than say, I absolutely agree with you, why not try, for example, And my last point, people are late, and that's a fact of life. I'll say something if it's caused inconvenience to me, because my preference is for it not to reoccur to me, and for people to appreciate the consequences of their action when it impacts me and how I feel about it. Let me be very clear here. I am not saying they are wrong. I am only sharing that the impact on me isn't acceptable to me. That's all. I run workshops twice a year in Singapore. Of course, there are always people who are late. Just like when I get on a plane, there's always someone late. I tell the participants not to comment when they arrive because late people already know they're late. So why pour hot water over it? I ask them if they will be on schedule next time. If they can't give an emphatic yes, I'll not accept it and explain my position. Some will spend a while blaming the traffic, the car, other people, the weather, and anything else except taking responsibility for being late. Fortunately, this works almost every time, and my experience over more than 15 years is they turn up on time the next day, and often well before start time. You see, I don't have to make them look bad. Fortunately, I've managed to get everybody to agree, and usually immediately so far. But you never know. If they are late again in the process is the same. Yeah, if they're late again, the same process. There's no point in shaming or blaming. Nothing to gain by doing so. Well, there you have it. Are you always aware of what your words are really saying? You know, your own words are the most important asset you have to help you learn more about who you are. I trust this was helpful and gives you plenty of food for thought. Please share with other people in groups. And please do add your comments, because that is how we all increase our learning. So, are you always aware of what your words are saying? Repeat, are you always aware of what your words are saying?